Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. I can feel the weight of today's topic, and I know you will too. We're about to delve into a story that's not just chilling, but deeply unsettling. A story that has sent shockwaves through the communities in Idaho and Pennsylvania. This isn't your run-of-the-mill true crime tale. This one hits different, and you'll soon see why. Today, we're unraveling the complex and horrifying case of Bryan Kohberger. Now, get this, Bryan wasn't just anyone. He was a PhD student specializing in criminology. That's right, a man deeply engrossed in the study of criminal behavior now stands accused of one of the most gruesome acts imaginable. A quadruple homicide that has left families shattered and communities questioning everything they thought they knew about safety and the human psyche. I want you to buckle up, because this journey we're about to embark on is a roller coaster of emotions, twists, and turns. We'll be navigating through the labyrinth of human behavior, the dark corners of academia, and the raw, emotional testimonies of those affected. This case is a stark reminder that sometimes the most horrifying monsters are the ones who walk among us, disguised as ordinary people. So, grab your notepads, your comfort blankets, or whatever it is you need when facing unsettling truths, because we're diving deep, and it's going to be intense. As we transition from our introduction, I can't help but feel a heavy sense of dread. It's November 13th, a date that will forever be etched in the memories of the University of Idaho community. 4 young lives, Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally extinguished in a setting that should have been their sanctuary, their off-campus rental home. Imagine the scene. A cozy living room filled with the laughter and chatter of roommates, the smell of home-cooked meals wafting through the air, textbooks and laptops scattered on coffee tables. A typical college home, filled with dreams, aspirations, and the promise of bright futures. But on that fateful night, this haven was transformed into a nightmarish tableau. The initial investigations paint a grim picture. Each victim was found stabbed multiple times, their bodies positioned in a way that suggests the assailant took their time, relishing in the horror they were creating. The walls, once adorned with posters and pictures capturing youthful smiles, were now splattered with blood, bearing silent witness to the unimaginable terror that unfolded. But amidst this darkness, there's a glimmer of what can only be described as a miracle. 2 other roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, survived. Their survival wasn't just luck, it was a fight. A fight against the looming shadow of death. A fight that involved barricading themselves in a room, hearts pounding as they dialed 911, praying that help would arrive in time. As we delve deeper into the crime scene, we'll explore the evidence collected, the clues left behind, and the questions that are still begging for answers. Was this a crime of opportunity, or was it meticulously planned? What did the forensics reveal about the weapon used? And most importantly, what was going through the minds of these young individuals during their final moments? This isn't just a crime scene. It's a snapshot of lost potential, of dreams unfulfilled, and of the fragility of life itself. As we navigate through the complexities of this case, let's not forget the human element, the lives that were lived, and the lives that were tragically cut short. As we turn the page from the haunting crime scene, we find ourselves grappling with a mix of relief and disbelief. Nearly 7 agonizing weeks had passed since that nightmarish evening. Weeks filled with sleepless nights for the families of the victims and a community living in fear. But then, a breakthrough. Bryan Kohberger, a PhD student in criminology of all things, was arrested in Pennsylvania, thousands of miles away from the scene of the crime. Now, you might be wondering, how did the police zero in on Bryan? The answer is a combination of dogged detective work, advanced forensics, and perhaps a touch of fate. Bryan wasn't just some random suspect. He was methodically tracked down through a web of digital footprints and surveillance footage. It's almost ironic. A man studying criminology, presumably aware of investigative techniques, leaving behind enough clues to become the prime suspect. The arrest wasn't a simple affair either. Imagine a small, nondescript Pennsylvania town, its residents blissfully unaware that a man charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of felony burglary was living among them. The tension was palpable as the SWAT team surrounded his residence, hearts pounding, weapons drawn, each officer aware that any mistake could be fatal. And then, the moment of truth, a flashbang, a shout, and Bryan was in custody, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Was it relief? Resignation? Only he knows. His extradition back to Idaho wasn't just a physical journey. It was an emotional one for the families who had been holding their breath, waiting for this day. As Bryan stepped off the plane, handcuffed and flanked by officers, the gravity of his charges weighed heavily in the air. 4 counts of murder, 1 count of felony burglary, each charge a stark reminder of the lives he's accused of shattering. But an arrest is not a conviction. As we delve into the subsequent chapters of this story, we'll explore the legal battles, the courtroom drama, and the ever-present question, is Bryan Kohberger truly the monster he's portrayed to be, or is there more to this story than meets the eye? This isn't just an arrest. It's a pivotal moment in a complex narrative, a narrative that involves not just the law, but the very essence of human morality and justice. In a case as convoluted and heartbreaking as this, it's often the tiniest of details that can make the biggest difference. And in the world of criminal investigations, nothing speaks louder than DNA. It's the silent witness, the unchangeable signature that each of us carries. It's a voice from the very core of our being. And in this case, it was the voice that screamed guilty. Imagine the anticipation in the lab as forensic scientists prepared to analyze the DNA samples collected from the crime scene. The air was thick with a mix of hope and dread. Each swab, each strand of hair, each microscopic sample held the potential to either crack the case wide open or lead to another frustrating dead end. And then, the moment everyone had been waiting for, a match. But not just any match, a familial match through genetic genealogy, linking Brian Kohberger to the crime scene through his father's DNA. It was a moment of scientific triumph, but also a moment that must have sent chills down the spines of Brian's family. But the story doesn't end there. A familial match might raise eyebrows, but it's not the smoking gun needed for a conviction. So, the investigators dug deeper, and what they found was the golden ticket, a direct DNA match linking Brian Kohberger to the crime scene. It was like finding the last piece of a horrific jigsaw puzzle, a piece that fit so perfectly it was almost poetic in its tragedy. Now, let's pause and consider the gravity of DNA evidence. It's not just a sequence of molecules, it's a narrative written in the language of life itself. It tells stories of heritage, of relationships, and sometimes of unspeakable acts. The role of DNA in solving crimes has revolutionized forensic science, turning what was once circumstantial into something concrete. But it also raises ethical questions. How far should we go in using genetic genealogy to solve crimes? Where do we draw the line between scientific curiosity and an invasion of privacy? As we move forward in this labyrinthine tale, we'll delve into the courtroom battles over the DNA evidence, the defense's counter-arguments, and the ethical dilemmas that this case has brought to the forefront. Because remember, DNA might be a powerful tool for justice, but it's also a double-edged sword that cuts deep into the fabric of what we consider ethical and just. Who is Brian Kohberger? That's the question that's been haunting everyone following this case. On paper, he's a PhD, student in criminology, a teaching assistant, and by all accounts, a brilliant mind. But as we all know, people are not just the sum of their resumes. They are intricate tapestries woven from a myriad of experiences, choices, and secrets. Imagine walking into one of Brian's criminology classes. There he is, standing at the front of the room, chalk in hand, passionately discussing theories of crime and justice. His students look up to him, captivated by his knowledge and charisma. But what goes on behind those academic eyes? What hidden layers exist beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary scholar? Let's start with his educational background. Brian was not just any student, he was a star, graduating at the top of his class. He was the kind of person who could dissect complex criminological theories as easily as most of us breathe. He had published papers, received grants, and was on a fast track to becoming an influential figure in his field. But brilliance often comes with its own set of complexities. Now, let's talk about his interests. Brian was an avid reader, a fan of classic literature and philosophical texts. He loved chess, a game that requires strategic thinking and foresight. He was also deeply interested in psychology, often engaging in debates about human behavior and morality. These interests may seem benign on the surface, but when viewed through the lens of the crimes he's accused of, they take on a darker, more ominous tone. But what about the people who knew him? Friends, family, colleagues, what did they see? Most describe him as reserved but not unfriendly, intelligent but not arrogant. However, some have hinted at a more complex personality, a duality that made him both fascinating and enigmatic. There were whispers about his temper, about a certain coldness that could sometimes creep into his interaction. And then there are the relationships. Brian had been in and out of romantic partnerships, each one leaving a trail of questions. Was he capable of love? Or was he just going through the motions? What role did these relationships play in shaping the man who would later stand accused of such heinous acts? As we peel back the layers of Brian Kohberger's life, we're left with more questions than answers. And that's what makes this case so perplexing and deeply unsettling. Because Brian Kohberger is not just a name on a court docket. He's a puzzle, a mystery wrapped in an enigma, and a stark reminder that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are those that wear the mask of normality. Contradictions. They're the spice of life, aren't they? But when it comes to criminal cases, they can also be the seeds of doubt, the gray areas that make us question everything we thought we knew. And in the case of Brian Kohberger, contradictions abound. Picture this, two people, both of whom knew Brian, sitting in the same room, yet describing two entirely different individuals. One paints the portrait of a bully, an aggressive personality who could make the walls close in on you with just a look. The other describes a victim, a quiet, studious individual who kept to himself and was often the target of ridicule. So, who's telling the truth? Or could it be that both are? Let's start with the bully narrative. Some classmates recall Brian as a domineering figure, especially in group discussions or projects. They speak of a man who wasn't afraid to belittle others to assert his intellectual superiority. One former classmate even mentioned an incident where Brian lost his temper during a heated debate, leaving everyone in the room on edge. Could this be the real Brian? The one capable of the crimes he's accused of? But then we have the bullied narrative. Other acquaintances describe Brian as the one who was often pushed around, both metaphorically and, at times, literally. They recall instances where he was the butt of jokes, sidelined in conversations, and generally treated as an outsider. According to this version, Brian was more of a wallflower than a weed, more likely to be the victim than the perpetrator. And what about his temperament? That's another puzzle. Some say he had a short fuse, that he could go from 0 to 100 in a matter of seconds. Others insist he was the epitome of calm, a man who would walk away from conflict rather than engage. So, where does that leave us? Confused, intrigued, and hungry for the truth. Because contradictions don't just muddy the waters, they make us question the very nature of human behavior. Can a person be both a bully and bullied? Can someone be both volatile and calm, depending on the circumstances or the company they keep? As we delve deeper into this labyrinth of contradictions, we're forced to confront our own biases, our own preconceived notions of guilt and innocence, because Brian Kohberger is not just a case study in criminology. He's a mirror reflecting the complexities and contradictions inherent in all of us. And that, my friends, is what makes this case so endlessly fascinating and profoundly disturbing. The courtroom, a stage where life's most dramatic moments unfold, where the line between guilt and innocence is drawn or blurred. And in the case of Brian Kohberger, the courtroom is set to become the theater of the absurd, the surreal, and perhaps the deeply unsettling. So, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Brian Kohberger has waived his right to a speedy trial. Now, for those of you who aren't legal eagles, the right to a speedy trial is a constitutional guarantee that aims to prevent undue and oppressive incarceration, anxiety, and public scorn. So why would someone voluntarily give that up? There are a few theories floating around. One is that Brian and his legal team are buying time, meticulously crafting a defense that they hope will create enough reasonable doubt to sway the jury. It's a high-stakes gamble, but one that could pay off if they manage to unearth new evidence or witnesses. Another theory is psychological. Could it be that Brian is using this time to come to terms with the gravity of the charges against him, to prepare himself mentally and emotionally for what promises to be a grueling, soul-bearing ordeal? After all, facing a jury is not just about answering questions, it's about laying your life bare for public scrutiny. But there's also a darker, more cynical view. Some speculate that by delaying the trial, Brian is hoping that public interest will wane, that the media circus will pack up and move on to the next big story, leaving behind only the die-hard followers who have already made up their minds about his guilt or innocence. In this scenario, a quieter trial could mean a more impartial jury and perhaps a more favorable outcome for Brian. And let's not forget the victims and their families. For them, this delay is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it prolongs their agony, forcing them to live in a state of suspended animation as they await closure. On the other hand, it gives them hope that justice will be served, that the extra time will allow for a more thorough investigation, leaving no stone unturned. So, as we await the unfolding of this legal drama, we're left with more questions than answers. Questions that challenge our understanding of justice, of human psychology, and of the very concept of truth. And that, my friends, is the enigma that is the legal proceedings of Brian Kohberger. The ripple effect. You know, it's fascinating how one event, one person, can send shockwaves through an entire community, leaving no life untouched. And in the case of Brian Kohberger, those ripples have turned into tsunamis of emotion, affecting not just the families of the victims, but also those who thought they knew him. First, let's talk about the families. The arrest of Brian brought a strange cocktail of emotions to the grieving families. Relief, yes, but also a kind of horror. Relief because there's a name, a face to direct their anger and sorrow towards. Horror because that face belonged to someone they might have passed in the grocery store, sat next to in a lecture, or even shared a laugh with at a local bar. The proximity of the alleged killer to their everyday lives adds a layer of complexity to their grief that's hard to put into words. Now, let's shift our focus to the community, particularly the academic circles of the University of Idaho and wherever Brian was pursuing his PhD. The faculties are in a state of collective disbelief. Here was a guy knee-deep in criminology, the study of criminal behavior. The irony is as thick as it is tragic. Professors are left questioning their judgment, their ability to assess character. Students are left wondering if the person sitting next to them could be harboring dark secrets. Trust. That fragile thread that holds the fabric of community together has been stretched to its limits. And what about the friends, the acquaintances, the casual onlookers? Their reactions range from shock to denial to a kind of morbid curiosity. Social media is ablaze with theories, with old photos of Brian being dissected for any signs of hidden darkness. Some are sharing stories, snippets of interactions they had with him, as if trying to piece together a puzzle that keeps changing shape. The universities involved are also grappling with this tragedy in their own ways. Counseling services have been ramped up, and town hall meetings are being organized to address community concerns. There's talk of reviewing security measures, of implementing more rigorous background checks for students and staff. But amidst all these logistical responses, there's an emotional undercurrent, a sense of vulnerability, a realization that if it could happen here, it could happen anywhere. So, as we navigate the labyrinth of this community's emotional landscape, we're reminded that the impact of a crime extends far beyond the headlines, the courtrooms, and the prison cells. It seeps into the very soul of a community, leaving scars that may never fully heal. The enigma that is the human mind. We've dissected the crime, the arrest, the evidence, and the people involved, but we're still left with this gnawing sense of incompleteness. Why? Because there are questions, so many questions, that remain unanswered. First and foremost, the motive. What drives a PhD student in criminology, of all things, to allegedly commit such a heinous act? Was it a twisted academic experiment gone horribly wrong? Or perhaps something more personal, more visceral? The theories are endless, but the answers are elusive. And then there's the question of Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, the roommates who miraculously survived. Why were they spared? Was it a matter of timing, a simple twist of fate? Or was there a reason, a method to this madness that we're yet to uncover? Their survival adds another layer of complexity to an already convoluted case. But the most pressing question of all, is Brian Kohberger truly guilty, or could he be innocent? The court of public opinion has already passed its judgment, but what about the court of law? We're all waiting, with bated breath, for the gavel to fall, for justice to speak its final word. But until then, the questions linger, haunting us like shadows in the dark. As the sun sets on this harrowing tale, we're left with a landscape filled with craters of doubt, mountains of emotion, and rivers of speculation. The impact of this crime has sent shockwaves far and wide, leaving communities, families, and even us, the storytellers, grappling for answers. So, what's next? We wait. We wait for the legal proceedings to unfold, for the evidence to speak, and for the truth to emerge from the fog of uncertainty. And as we wait, let's not forget to look out for each other, to hold our loved ones a little tighter, and to stay vigilant. Because the world can be a beautiful place, but it can also be unfathomably dark. Thank you for joining me on this emotional roller coaster, this deep dive into the abyss of the human psyche. Stay safe, stay curious, and until next time, take care.